There's a truth buried deep beneath all the noise, deeper than the affirmations you whisper, deeper than the goals you set, the rituals you follow, the crystals you charge under the moonlight. It lives beneath the vision boards and the journaling prompts, beneath your strategy, beneath your struggle. A truth so quiet, most people spend their whole lives avoiding its voice, but it waits, patiently, beneath the layers of identity you've worn to survive, beneath the masks of achievement, perfection, and productivity. And this truth is simple, almost too simple for the mind to grasp. You don't manifest what you want. You manifest what you are. And what you are is not defined by the story you tell yourself in moments of clarity. It's defined by the story your body believes when no one is watching. The story that's woven into your breath, your posture, your silence. The story your nervous system repeats like a lullaby, long after the conscious mind has fallen asleep. This is the subconscious truth that shapes your entire reality. Not from the surface, but from the soil. And until you face it, until you meet it with tenderness instead of resistance, you will keep rebuilding the same version of reality, dressed up in different clothes. Because manifestation is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the programming, before the fear, before you learned to disconnect from your own signal in order to be accepted. And that disconnection, that's what keeps the old reality alive. Not the world out there, the world in here, the landscape of your inner state. The vibration you emit before you speak, the signal your body sends before your brain can even interpret it. Have you ever noticed how you can do everything right, visualize, script, take action, and still feel stuck in the same loop? It's not because you're broken. It's because the subconscious is still holding the blueprint. It's still operating from the agreements you made when you were too young to protect your own frequency. Agreements like, I have to shrink to stay safe. Love means abandoning myself. I only matter if I'm achieving. These are not thoughts, they're frequencies, stored in your fascia, your breath, your baseline nervous system state. And until they shift, nothing on the surface will fully stick. You'll keep reaching, keep repeating, keep wondering why nothing truly lands. But what if I told you that the collapse of your old reality doesn't require more effort? What if it begins with a softening, a remembering? What if the moment you stop trying to force a new reality and start becoming the frequency of it, everything starts to rearrange on its own, not through control, through coherence? That's the real shift, when your nervous system feels safe enough to hold a new identity, when your body starts believing a new story, not as a performance, but as truth. A felt truth, a breathed truth, a lived truth. That's when the quantum responds, not because you demanded it, but because you finally became it. Reality is not out to test you. It's reflecting you. Every delay, every detour, every block, all of it is just life showing you where your signal is still misaligned, where you're still trying to manifest a new world with the energy of your old self. But when you change the frequency of the observer, when you become someone whose very presence emits the signal of safety, trust, openness, the observed must follow. That's physics. That's coherence. That's alignment. And that's when timelines collapse. Not with more doing, with more remembering, not through the mind, through the body, through the breath, through the decision to no longer argue with your own becoming, to no longer beg for a life you were always meant to live, to embody it instead, as if it's already done, because energetically, it is. I remember the first time I realized my reality wasn't personal. It felt like the ground beneath my feet had quietly shifted. Like I was waking up from a dream I didn't know I was in. Everything I thought I was choosing, every relationship, every opportunity, even every obstacle, had been pre-selected, not by fate, but by the silent filter of my subconscious identity. I hadn't been making choices. I had been matching frequencies, and those frequencies were born not in the now, but in the past, in the echoes of childhood, in the micro moments of be quiet, not now. That's too much. You're too sensitive. I had become fluent in self-abandonment, thinking it was maturity. I had normalized dysregulation, thinking it was ambition. I had mistaken pressure for power, control for clarity, and performance for presence. But the body knew. The body always knows. The body never lies. It doesn't care what vision you wrote down in your journal. It cares how safe you feel in your chest when you walk toward it. It cares how your breath moves when you speak your truth. It listens to your tone, not your words. It hears your fear, not your affirmations. That's the real language of manifestation. Not your conscious voice, but your subconscious vibration. And that vibration, that felt frequency, is what life responds to, always. This is why the same patterns keep showing up, even in different forms. Why a new job feels strangely like the last one. Why new relationships echo old wounds. It's not punishment, it's precision. The quantum field is always giving you the version of reality that's coherent with your current signal. And if the signal hasn't changed, the story can't either. Not for long. Because your subconscious isn't trying to sabotage you. It's trying to protect you. It's trying to keep you in what's familiar. And until you teach it that safety can exist in expansion, that being seen doesn't mean being hurt, it will keep choosing the known, even if the known is painful. But here's the gift buried in the ache. What you can observe, you can rewire. What you can feel, you can shift. And the first step isn't changing the external, it's noticing the internal. Tracking your breath when you speak your desires. Watching your posture when you receive attention. Listening to the tiny flinch in your gut when life starts getting good. That flinch is gold. That's the access point. That's where the collapse begins. Because every time you stay with yourself in that moment, every time you breathe instead of brace, you're creating a new signal. You're reteaching your nervous system that safety doesn't live in the past. It lives in presence, in now, in embodiment. And embodiment, that's where everything changes. Because embodiment isn't about pretending to be confident. It's about becoming energetically unavailable for anything that contradicts your truth. It's about letting your body feel what it would feel if the thing you desire was already here. Not someday. Now. It's not about visualizing the new version of you. It's about becoming the vibrational anchor of her. Walking like her. Breathing like her. Deciding like her. Not to convince the world, but to convince your cells. To show your subconscious that the old identity is no longer needed. That it's safe to soften, safe to expand, safe to receive. And in that moment, not a grand, dramatic one, but an inner one, reality begins to crumble, quietly, gently, with grace. The old scripts no longer feel like home. The old dynamics lose their magnetism, and something new begins to take root. Not because you chased it, because you became it, because your signal shifted, and life, like a tuning fork, responded in kind. That's when you know the collapse has begun. It's a strange kind of beauty. The moment your body no longer resonates with your old life, not because you've outgrown it with pride, but because your frequency has softened into something truer. You no longer feel the same pull toward the things that once defined you, the urgency to prove, the hunger to be chosen, the ache to finally be enough. It's not that the patterns disappear instantly, it's that you stop feeding them. You stop vibrating at the level where they make sense, and without your energy, they dissolve. That's the collapse. Not destruction, but disinterest. The emotional charge leaves the story. The loop unhooks. And suddenly, you're no longer playing the same role in your own movie. But the mind doesn't surrender easily. It was built to protect you, and it confuses the unknown with danger. So when you stop clinging to familiar pain, your mind panics. It will whisper things like, "This can't be real. You're just pretending. Who do you think you are?" That voice is not your enemy. It's a guardian of your former identity, an echo of your past frequency trying to keep you in the known. And you don't silence it with logic. You soothe it with presence, with breath, with the embodied decision to stay in the vibration of your new self, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. Have you ever felt that subtle war inside, where one part of you wants to expand and the other wants to run? That's the edge of transformation. That's where reality begins to split. Because each time you choose coherence over chaos, each time you stay regulated in the face of a trigger, you're anchoring into a new timeline. A version of you that doesn't just think differently, but lives differently, reacts differently, receives differently. It's subtle at first. You might notice that conversations feel less draining, that you need less validation, that certain people start falling away, not with drama, but with distance. Not because you're better than them, because your signals no longer match. Your nervous system stopped broadcasting the frequency of lack, and they don't know how to find you anymore. This isn't loneliness, it's recalibration. You're clearing space for resonance, for relationships that don't require self-betrayal, for opportunities that meet your wholeness, not your performance. And it's here, in this in-between, that you must trust the unseen. Because the old reality will try to seduce you back with comfort, with old habits, old patterns, old temptations. It will test your coherence, not to punish you, to ask, are you sure? Are you really ready to be who you say you are? And that's the moment you breathe deeper. You soften the grip. You let your body speak louder than your fear. You remember, you don't manifest with effort. You manifest with essence. You don't align through thought. You align through nervous system safety, through embodied truth, through the decision to stay present, even when it's easier to dissociate. Because your frequency is not just energy, it's instruction. It tells the field who you are, and the field always listens. So when you collapse an old reality, you're not destroying your past. You're disidentifying from it. You're no longer claiming struggle as your origin story. You're no longer confusing urgency with power. You're no longer choosing what's familiar over what's true. And that shift, that internal alignment, begins to rewrite the external, slowly, then suddenly. Because when the signal stabilizes, life rearranges, not with noise, with precision. You won't need to force it. You'll just become incompatible with anything less than alignment. And that's when everything begins to change, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. I used to think manifestation was about visualization, about holding the image long enough, speaking the desire loud enough, working hard enough to make it real. But that was still doing, still grasping, still trying to bend reality with will instead of merging with it through vibration. The real power came not when I visualized the life I wanted, but when I felt safe enough to receive it. When I stopped trying to become her and started being her, subtly, quietly, in the way I walked into a room, in the way I let silence be enough, in the way I trusted the pause instead of panicking to fill it. That's the frequency shift. And it doesn't require perfection. It requires presence. Your subconscious isn't moved by vision. It's moved by safety. It's not asking if your dream is possible. It's asking, do we survive if this becomes real? Do we stay loved if we stop performing? Do we stay safe if we let go of control? And if the answer is no, even if it's buried beneath layers of mindset and mantras, the body will sabotage the expansion. Not maliciously, lovingly, protectively. Because your nervous system isn't here to manifest your goals. It's here to keep you alive. And it will choose the known, even if it's painful, over the unknown every single time, unless you teach it otherwise. And that teaching doesn't happen through force. It happens through gentleness, through emotional safety, through the willingness to meet yourself at the root of your discomfort and stay. That's the portal. That's where the old timeline begins to disintegrate. Not with grand declarations, but with micro-decisions. The moment you stay soft when your instinct is to tense. The moment you breathe instead of react. The moment you say, I'm still safe when everything inside you wants to run. That's where embodiment begins. And embodiment is everything. Because you don't attract what you script on paper. You attract what your body believes is normal. That's why true manifestation isn't about fixing the external. It's about regulating the internal. Becoming a safe place for your desire to land. Think about it. Would you trust your dream with someone who's constantly bracing for impact? Who's flooded with anxiety every time something good happens? Who can't hold presence without collapsing into performance? Of course not. Your future self is looking for a stable home. Not a frantic hustle, not a desperate plea, a home, a frequency that says, it's already done. I don't need to reach, I only need to receive. And that frequency isn't something you find, it's something you become. Not by changing everything, but by choosing differently in the smallest moments. When you're triggered, when you're tired, when you feel unseen, that's where the old coding lives, and that's where the new coding is born. In the breath you take before responding, in the way you hold your heart when it aches, in the decision to stop abandoning yourself in moments of intensity. That's quantum. That's collapse. That's coherence. So if your life feels like it's falling apart, if the people, patterns, and plans are crumbling around you, breathe. You're not breaking. You're recalibrating. Your old reality is collapsing not because you did something wrong, but because you finally aligned with something true, something higher, something more you. And everything that's incompatible with that truth is being gently cleared, not to leave you empty, but to leave you open. Open to a life that doesn't require you to hustle for your worth. Open to a love that doesn't need you to shrink. Open to a reality that matches your regulated frequency, not your survival strategies. And when you hold that openness, not just once, but daily, breath by breath, your field changes, your signal shifts, and life responds, not with chaos, with coherence. Because what's meant for you is not found through force. It's felt through frequency. There's a moment, almost imperceptible, when you realize you're no longer chasing. You're no longer running toward some future version of yourself, hoping she will finally feel like home. Because something inside of you, something deep and still and ancient, has remembered you already are her. Not because you accomplished it all, but because you stopped needing to earn your own worth. That moment, it changes everything. Not because the external world shifts instantly, but because your inner posture softens, your energy stops striving, your heart opens just enough to let the quantum in. We've been taught that alignment is a finish line, a goal, a moment of perfection when all the stars line up. But that's a myth. Alignment isn't something you achieve. It's something you return to, over and over, in the most ordinary moments. It's in the breath you reclaim after a difficult conversation. It's in the way you choose presence when your old patterns beg for distraction. It's in the sacred pause between reaction and response. That pause is where the collapse happens. Because in that space you are no longer operating from the old script. You're choosing a new signal, a new identity, a new version of self that no longer agrees to perform struggle in order to feel alive. This is the essence of quantum embodiment. It's not about controlling your thoughts. It's about regulating your frequency, about letting your entire system, your breath, your tone, your energy, become a coherent field that signals safety, truth, and readiness. Not readiness to hustle, but readiness to receive. Because in the quantum field, receiving isn't about waiting for permission. It's about becoming the vibrational match to the life you already sense is yours. Not with force, but with frequency. You'll know the shift is happening when life stops feeling like a fight. When synchronicities begin to flow, not because you forced them, but because you surrendered the part of you that thought it needed to control everything. You'll notice that you're no longer magnetized to chaos, that your nervous system doesn't crave adrenaline to feel alive. That peace starts to feel like home, not because nothing's happening, but because you're no longer vibrating in conflict with yourself. That's coherence. And coherence collapses timelines. You may still experience contrast. You may still feel the edge of fear. But now, something is different. You no longer abandon yourself in those moments. You stay, you breathe, you anchor. And that, more than any affirmation or vision board, is what tells the quantum, I'm ready. Not just for the thing I desire, but for the version of me who can hold it. And life responds, always. Not because it suddenly approves of you, but because it always did. You just stopped doubting it. You stopped leaking energy trying to prove yourself. And that allowed the signal to clarify. And when the signal is clear, manifestation becomes a side effect of embodiment. This is the quiet revolution. The gentle, radical decision to stop living from fear and start living from felt truth. To let your nervous system lead you back to coherence. To choose inner resonance over external validation. And to know, in your bones, that everything you thought you had to chase is already orbiting your field, waiting for you to match it. Not with effort, with essence. So take a breath, deeper than before. Let the exhale remind your system, it's safe now. Safe to stop pretending. Safe to stop performing. Safe to start being. You've done enough. You've always been enough. And the collapse of your old reality isn't the end, it's the invitation. The beginning of a life that mirrors your truth, not your fear. A life built not on control, but on coherence. Not on effort, but on energetic alignment, not on hope, but on frequency. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is nothing at all. Just sit, feel, let life touch you without reacting. Let the moment shape you without needing to control it. It's in that stillness that the old architecture begins to dissolve. The scaffolding of identities you built to survive, the pleaser, the achiever, the chameleon, starts to loosen. Not because you fought it, but because you no longer need it. The signal has changed. The observer has shifted. And when the observer shifts, the entire field rearranges. Not because you commanded it to, but because the quantum always mirrors back your most stabilized frequency. Have you noticed how certain things that once triggered you now feel distant? How some conversations no longer pull you in? That's not indifference. That's evolution. Your body is no longer coded to respond from the old wound. The charge is gone. And what's left is space. Sacred, open, alive. Space to choose differently. Space to create from alignment, not urgency. Space to feel your own frequency, uninterrupted by noise. And in that space, manifestation becomes magnetic. Not because you've finally earned it, but because you've finally stopped resisting it. Resistance, you see, isn't always loud. It often hides in the most subtle places. In the clench of your jaw when someone compliments you. In the way you talk yourself out of rest. In the tight grip around your desires, as if they'll escape if you don't hold on. But all of that is just protection. Old programming trying to guard a version of you that doesn't exist anymore. And the moment you meet that resistance with compassion instead of control, it softens. It melts. It no longer needs to run the show. Because your body has a new instruction now. Safety in expansion. Peace in presence. Power in surrender. This is where the true collapse happens. Not in dramatic events, but in micro moments of neutrality. When you no longer feel the pull to fix, to hustle, to chase. When you can witness a trigger and not personalize it. When you can sit in uncertainty without collapsing into panic. These are the new markers of embodiment, the quiet proof that your identity has shifted. And as identity shifts, so does trajectory. Timelines close not because you slammed the door, but because you simply stopped walking down the hallway. Your energy changed directions, and reality, loyal as ever, followed. So what now? What do you do in the in-between? In the sacred space after collapse but before the full bloom? You root. You regulate. You let your body become a home for the frequency of your next chapter. You stop reaching into the future and start anchoring into now. You remember that the field responds to your now, not your someday. And that means your most important job is no longer about building. It's about becoming, not more doing, more being, more remembering, more listening to the hum beneath your thoughts, the vibration beneath your voice, the knowing beneath your logic. You start to feel it, don't you? That quiet clarity, that sacred neutrality, the sense that you don't need to prove anything anymore, that your becoming is already in motion, even if you can't see all the pieces yet, that life isn't testing you, it's tuning you, calibrating you to a higher resonance, where truth feels like peace, and desire feels like a return, not a reach. This is the frequency of quantum alignment, the place where effort becomes unnecessary because the signal is enough, where the heart and mind stop battling and start breathing in rhythm, where manifestation is no longer a chase, but a mirror, reflecting who you've become in the unseen, and now, finally, seen. What if I told you the most magnetic version of you is the one who no longer tries? Not because she's given up, but because she's remembered who she is beneath the noise, beneath the striving, beneath the illusion that becoming more is the way home. The truth is, the version of you who receives with ease isn't more healed. She's more honest. She's not perfect. She's present. She doesn't chase alignment. She lives it, breathes it, embodies it, not in performance, but in permission. Permission to be enough now, to belong now, to hold the frequency of her future now, not as a fantasy, but as a felt reality. And that's the paradox. You collapse your old timeline, not by escaping it, but by turning toward it with grace. By looking at your patterns not with shame, but with sacred curiosity. By saying, I see you. The part of me that hustles for love. The part that shrinks to feel safe. The part that fears softness. And instead of exiling those parts, you integrate them. You offer them coherence. You become the safe space they never had. That's embodiment. And embodiment changes everything, because it sends a signal to the field. I'm no longer fractured. I no longer operate in separation. I am whole. And the quantum doesn't argue with wholeness. It responds to it like a mirror to light. From that place, your energy becomes undeniable, not because it demands attention, but because it radiates truth. The kind of truth that doesn't need to convince. The kind that speaks in silence. The kind that walks into a room and shifts the room. Not from ego, from embodiment. Because people feel you before they hear you. They register your regulation, your rootedness, your coherence. And the universe does too. That's why the things you once begged for start arriving unannounced. That's why synchronicities become so frequent. They feel like punctuation in your day. Not because you're forcing reality to bend, but because your frequency has become undeniable. And yet, even here, the mind will ask, is it really this simple? And the answer is yes, but not easy, because it requires the kind of honesty that leaves no room for bypass, the kind of presence that feels everything, the kind of surrender that doesn't look like weakness, but like raw, unwavering trust. Trust in yourself, trust in the field, trust that your desires aren't random, they're remembering, that what you want is not a test, but a timeline calling you back to yourself. You begin to realize that your life isn't changing because of what you're doing differently, but because of who you're no longer pretending to be. The masks fall, the grasping stops, the self-abandonment ends, and in its place, stillness, spaciousness, magnetic clarity, the kind that doesn't hustle, doesn't perform, doesn't explain. It just is, and that is enough. So here you are, not on the verge, but in the shift, not waiting, but already vibrating at the frequency of what's next. And maybe there's nothing to add. Maybe your next breakthrough doesn't require more effort, but more exhale, more trust, more willingness to let go of what was never yours to carry. Maybe all that's left now is to be the signal, to hold the frequency, to breathe as if it's already done. Because in the quantum, it is. And now, feel this with me. Really feel it. There's nothing left to fix, nothing left to prove, nothing more to chase. Just you, here, now, breathing in a reality that's no longer being constructed from the echoes of your past, but from the vibration of your presence. You are not standing at the edge of your old life. You've already stepped through. The collapse has happened. Maybe not with fireworks, maybe not with applause, but with the sacred silence of your own return, that quiet, electric recognition. I remember who I am, not a version built on performance, but a signal rooted in truth. The truth that says, I am safe now, I am whole now, I am allowed to receive now. Not because I earned it, but because I finally became coherent with it. And coherence, it changes everything. You stop interpreting resistance as a sign to try harder and start reading it as a signal to soften deeper. You stop needing signs from the universe and start realizing you are the sign. You are the frequency. You are the magnet. Your very being is now tuned to a different bandwidth, and what doesn't match it simply cannot stay. The timelines that once pulled at your ankles with guilt, fear, obligation, they dissolve. Not because you pushed them away, but because you no longer resonate with them. You no longer need them to feel like yourself. You have remembered, your alignment is not something to earn, it's something to allow. You are no longer calling in your future. You are meeting it, in your breath, in your choices, in your stillness. And as you walk through this new field, you realize nothing was ever missing, just distorted, just misaligned. And now, you're clear. You don't just think differently. You feel differently, move differently, choose differently. You're not manifesting for the high. You're living in coherence with your truth. Your nervous system no longer confuses chaos with normal. Your body no longer sees expansion as a threat. You are the calm. You are the clarity. You are the collapse of every false timeline, and the seed of something radically new. And the beauty. You didn't get here by forcing change. You got here by choosing coherence in the moments that mattered most. When your nervous system whispered, "This feels unfamiliar," and you breathed anyway. When your mind said, "This is too big," and you stayed anyway. When the field asked, "Are you sure?" And you answered not with fear, but with frequency. And now, it's done. Not because everything outside of you is perfect, but because everything inside of you is aligned. That's the only truth that ever mattered. And from here, life becomes something else entirely. Not a game of control, but a dance of resonance. Not a test to pass, but a reflection to witness. You are no longer waiting. You are remembering. You are no longer becoming. You are being. And in that being, everything begins.